Hello, all, and welcome back to the third episode of our podcast, Domestic Workers Organizing for Legal Change in Asia. Today, we're joined by two guests from Hong Kong, where an estimated 400,000 migrant domestic workers play a critical role in keeping the global city running. Despite being covered by many of the same labor protections as local workers, they face a range of challenges in seeking redress for abusive working conditions. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Jec. Jec is the General Secretary of the Hong Kong Federation of Asian Domestic Workers Unions, FADWU. She will talk about domestic workers' protections and entitlements in Hong Kong. We'll also discuss the particular challenges migrant domestic workers face in claiming their rights, such as the so-called 2-week rule, which she tells us all about. Thank you so much, Jec, for joining us today. And we're really looking forward to hearing and learning from you about domestic workers in Hong Kong. So, in the first instance, could you tell us more about FADWU, how it was formed, what is its strength?
Okay. FADWU is a federation of Asian Domestic Workers Union, which consists of 5 nationalities. It includes the Nepal, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and of course the local Hong Kong local domestic workers. This was formed last 2010. It is also the first federation of domestic workers which was been registered to the Registry of Trade Union in Hong Kong. Uh, FADWU is educating migrant domestic workers to empower them regarding on their labor rights and welfare, especially women who is majority is domestic workers. So we are also providing paralegal with regards into their cases of domestic workers. So it is very important for us to educate them regarding labor rights and their welfares. Likewise, we are also advocating and fighting a better labor situation of domestic workers in Hong Kong. So we are doing organizing local and migrants.
And you mentioned that FADWU is the first trade union of domestic workers that's registered. So, what do you think? Like, is it more advantageous to form a trade union? As it
Uh,
helped the struggle in Hong Kong?
Oh, yes. We could say that trade union is of course, it's a big advantage to all of us because it is very easy for us to lobby the government as they are recognizing trade union. We had this kind of conversation of we had this kind of talks every year with the labor department. It regards in our labor rights, wages, in our labor protection. So in this factor, since they are recognizing us, we had also the voice and we had the chance to talk with the government. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Collectively. Yeah.
yeah. So forming a trade union is one right that domestic workers have there. But could you tell us some more about what are the broad rights that domestic workers in Hong Kong are entitled to?
If we talk generally for domestic workers, not only for migrant domestic workers, we had a lot of rights in here. We are entitled for 1 rest day. We are entitled for maternity leave, statutory holiday, annual leave, sick leave, and free medication. We are also benefited from long service and severance pay. With all this entitlement, migrant domestic workers is not the same as local. So even we had this broad of the same entitlement as domestic workers, migrant domestic workers had an exclusion. Example, rest days. We are not entitled to have a 24 hours, though it was written in the employment ordinance that we are entitled to 24 rest day. Majority of migrant domestic workers had its own curfew. They have to work before they go out and they have to work before they come back. So they are not enjoying that kind of 24 hours rest day, unlike with other domestic workers, which is I'm referring with those local and likewise with those from mainland China. Secondly is the we had also the free medication for migrant domestic workers when we had the contract is terminated or we had already finished our contract, we are no longer entitled for this, unlike with the local domestic workers. Yeah. So those are the samples. We had a
Okay.
broad entitlement. Yeah. For migrants, though we
Yes.
are if considering with other, yes, we had a large number of as a migrant domestic workers in here, but of course there's always an exclusion of rights because we are migrants. Of course they are local, so there's we could say they had the priority to prioritize the local rather than migrants. Yeah.
What about employers in Hong Kong? Is there a employers association that's there in Hong Kong, and are they very active?
Oh yes, there is an employers association in here, which is a big factor why it's too hard also to for us to pursue our fights, because there's always two sides in here, the side of employer and sides of domestic worker. Example, wages. For employers, they want the minimum wage to be lowered. Despite of 4,800, they want it to put it 4,500. And there is this association of domestic workers who want to fight for a higher salary. So there is this kind of uh struggles with the employers association. Yeah. They are very active with regards into fighting also with their rights as an employer.
So there are these broad rights. So how is the general level of implementation of these rights? There are these really strong rights on paper, but how are they being implemented?
If we talk about implementation, of course, it was not properly implemented. Though we had a lot of protection laws and welfare in the employment ordinance, in the standard contract, it was not properly implemented. That is why there are still a lot of domestic workers who are being harassed and abuses despite of being in a live-in condition. So it regards of these all protection laws that was been provided, we could say that there's still a big exclusion if we talks about migrant domestic workers. Example in here is the access to justice. We had the 2 weeks rule. We had the problem on employment, overcharging of employment agencies. We had this exclusion of the minimum allowable wage and mandatory pension fund. So these are the parts of protection laws and welfare of domestic workers, which was migrant domestic workers was excluded. And maybe the big factor is that they are not recognizing as domestic work as work.
And you also mentioned earlier, like there are paralegals that are there. So
Mm-hmm.
could you tell us a bit more about that? Are these domestic workers who are trained, or and what do they do?
uh, since it is our part of educating and empowering domestic workers, we are really going into a training. Example, for the case team, we had a training for the whole year to study the labor rights and welfare, protection rights and welfare of in Hong Kong. In order for us to help our co-domestic workers in filing cases, in helping them to go to the labor tribunal court, in order for them to know where are they going if they are abused, if they are harassed. So secondly is that we are providing also a lawyer with them in partnership with our NGO lawyers. Yeah.
And what would you say are the major challenges that you're encountering when, you're trying to implement these rights?
Our first challenges is very hard because first in Hong Kong, domestic work was not recognized as work. So there is this kind of challenges that we have. So since you are not recognized as a worker, the privilege is so little. You will still be discriminated. You are still feels like you are slave in here. Despite of this laws that was been existing. We are also it is a challenge also the long working hours, the rest days that we have, the exclusion of the minimum allowable wage, wherein migrant domestic workers in a live-in condition is a 24 hours on call. But we had the lowest wage among all the domestic workers in here. So Of course, this is the challenges that we are facing. The 2 weeks rule, the access to justice, those discrimination. We had the 2 weeks rule as well. So there's a lot of challenges, especially if you had a case in here and you had only 2 weeks to stay. How can you struggle with your case? Yeah.
And could you explain for the our listeners, like what is the 2 weeks rule?
Okay. For my 2 weeks rule is only imposed for migrant domestic workers, excluding local. So when we said 2 weeks rule, once you had terminated your contract or you are terminated, you had only 2 weeks to stay in Hong Kong to find a job. Whether you find a job or not, you have to go back to your place of origin to wait for your visa or to find or to start looking for another employer going back here. So unlike with the domestic workers local, of course, they can find anytime. So we had the limit of time in here. And that makes us most difficult, especially if you had a dispute with your employer. 2 weeks rule is a discriminating action or discriminating policy for us. Because if we could see why we needed to go back again in our place of origin, where in fact we are already here. So we find it a discriminatory action. Example, we why a lot of domestic workers is not pursuing their cases. If you had 2 weeks in here and you have to renew your visa to stay, you have to pay it again and again and again. That makes migrant domestic workers difficult to pursue their cases because first they don't have source of income. You cannot work while cases is going on. You had this limit of time. So we are already telling them to abolish this 2 weeks rule because this is one factor also why employment agencies is abusing those domestic workers who are looking for a job.
And there is no way that you can pursue it once you're out of the country. Have there been like FADWU has tried to sort of overcome this 2 week rule, even if the worker goes back to their home country?
We are already struggling this even before pandemic because if we could see this, this is the reason why we kept on fighting or we kept on lobbying the government because way back on the pandemic time, domestic workers who had lost a job, they don't need to go back in their place of origin. But why now it's normal? Why you are asking them to go back with their place of origin if you have done it already during pandemic? So that is what we are struggling with the government to abolish totally that 2 weeks rule. We cannot do anything with domestic workers after they go back with their place of origin because that is already a rule. That is a policy that was being implemented by the immigration of Hong Kong.
And before we let you go, could
Yeah.
you tell us like what are some of the changes you would like to see? Like, firstly, I would ask about the law. In the law, what would you like to see?
It regards into the laws in Hong Kong. We find it so beautiful, but we want it to be strictly implemented. Because even how beautiful a law is, if you're not properly implementing it, it's nonsense. Second, in implementing, they have also to investigate and inspect those illegalities that was done by employer and employment agencies. Uh, Third, maybe is of course, it is very significant for us that they had to recognize that domestic work is work. That is only the thing that we feel that we are well protected, accepted in this society. Yeah.
To help illustrate the realities of these legal limitations on workers' lives, we have our next guest, Sara, who is the Vice President of the Union of Nepalese Domestic Workers in Hong Kong. They're affiliated with FADWU, the Hong Kong Federation of Asian Domestic Workers Unions. The Union of Nepalese Domestic Workers in Hong Kong was established in 2015 and comprises of migrant domestic workers. Sara, who's a domestic worker herself, will be sharing the story of a live-in domestic worker in Hong Kong from Nepal and how the union supported her when her rights were grossly violated by her employer.
I had one case in I had one case last year, 2022. She was abused by her employer a lot. And then this story came up to me. Somebody called me, her neighbors called me. The uh, employer neighbors saw her that she was abused a lot. And then the employer was very bad with the previous worker also. So somebody called me, and then the story was held for until from October until January. So and after that the girl, Lesa Nirmala, she was tortured by her boss a lot. And then the thing is, she was abused in everything, and she was still new in Hong Kong. So she was very new, so she don't know anything about Hong Kong and what was going, and the rules and regulation, and she don't know how to go to the market. She don't know. She was not allowed to go by herself because her employer will bring her together. So she have no idea, nothing, because if we go in new country or new places, we all are facing those things. That's like culture shock, right? She already have a culture shock, and beside that, she was a very young girl. So one day I got that call on October 2022, but the call was again, the victim didn't call me. And then the next time on January 19, I got a call. So it was very serious. And I heard that the girl was running away from the house. And then I heard the story that she wanted to go for suicide, to kill herself, because she have some loan in her hometown in the country. And then she get some loan to come to Hong Kong. So she came to Hong Kong, but it was not good time for her. So she decided to suicide or kill herself. But she ran away from the house in the morning, and then the thing was happened. She have no idea where she go, and she have a phone. And then after that, she could not resist her work in the workplace because the employer abused her. Like they cut her hair, and they frequently the lady boss is hitting her, and then putting her down, just like, you don't sit beside my children, you don't come close to my children. But still she have to cook and work and everything she have to do. But that time, she was, I think she was too much, she cannot resist anymore. So she planned to run away because she don't know anybody in Hong Kong. So she was just like, everything was very bad for her. And then she have a decision to die. So it was very painful story. And then her boss even cut her hair. And then and then she also used to um, throw some food on her, on the top of her body, like from the head to toe, like that, some chopping vegetable something. And she also used to poke her with the hanger, hanger. She poked her. These things happened to her, and it was very sad. And then, and suddenly, the first person who called me on October 2022, she again called me on January. And so we found out, we don't know where she was, and we have no clue where she was gone. And suddenly, uh, just like, we were very blind, we don't know where she was. And then January 19, she was whole day in the park, whole night in the park. And 20, I only heard about her on 20, and 20 whole day, and then suddenly in the night. And her neighbors also go to find her. And then it was such a tough time because she was, and her phone battery was almost going off. And it was, we don't know what to do. It was, we don't know, we have no word, I don't know. And then suddenly, I the lady who called me, she told her, don't worry, just come back to the house, because they were in the same building, her boss and them were in the same buildings. Suddenly Nirmala told me that she suddenly think was change her mind, not to suicide herself, not to die, because she was thinking about her parents, about her family. And she thought that, oh, some few just like some some loan I have, that doesn't mean I have to die. So I have to live and do something, just like face the wall, something she decided.
Once she got in touch with you, what happened next?
She didn't talk with me, just like we only get a picture because her phone was battery was down and it's all
Okay.
running out of battery. So the lady told her, in case if you decided to come home, just come. I'll take care of you. So I, after my work, I just asked a permission from my employer just to go and find her. And my employer, they're Irish family, they're good people. So they say, okay, you can go. So I just run with just like very nothing prepared, just like take my handbag and run to find her. But it was a good thing. In the meantime, she came back home in the evening. So the thing was, then we have to bring her. And frequently, I got a call that the other lady was very, very just like frightened, and she asked me, let's go to the police, let's go to the police. And I say, just calm down and let's hold and wait, maybe she will change her mind and come back home. Just like we have some belief in there. So
Hmm.
so that happened. And then, and I was in the bus, it was very restless time. And then the lady called me back, oh, she's here in our building, hiding on hiding behind the stair right there. No, the stair is very dark. And then the lady bring her to her house, and then she treat her and then help her, just like give her food, then give her bag and give her some changes, something like bath, everything happened. So they called me, and then I was so relaxed, and I went to Yinlong, to my friend house, and I rest there. And in the morning I bring her to the police station with one of my friend, and then we went to the police station. So when we are in the police station, the employer also, after 2 days they are in the police station, they didn't come to the police station in the first days. And the employer, both of them, the man and the couple, both of them come to us, just like aggressively come to us to fight with us. But the police depart us in separate room. The And she was very worried. And then I, on the same day, on Sunday, we bring her to find a shelter, and so we move her to shelter. So she lived
Okay.
there until May, and between there we have many hearing in the court, just 2 or 3 times, and then help us, because I'm just like I work in the house. So even though my employer very good, but I cannot keep going out, so I have to give them respect. So, and then was the one to follow up. And then finally we go to end the case, because the girl, she could not talk too much. She was just like frightened, and the employer more abuse this I abused her even in the court. And then she was she have no idea, no clues, like because Anne was with her, and then because two of them cannot communicate in a language, she don't know English and don't
Hmm.
know Nepali or Hindi, something like that. So both of them are just like couldn't, and couldn't just like press too much. So she finally decided to settle down in small amount, but we are not satisfied with that one. So these are the story right now. And then we are having her again criminal case. The employer was already sued for the criminal case. So right now she has gone home.
So, were there two types of cases that were going on? A civil
The, the
case and a criminal case.
the first one is already done.
So, could you
The
tell us a bit more about that case? What were the demands of Nirmala and what she got?
Nirmala demand was her holidays were unpaid, salary was unpaid, and then she won all the statutory holidays. That are the things we are getting in Hong Kong, just like statutory holidays, and then salary was unpaid, and then her weekly holiday, weekend was no holidays. So these things were happened. So she claimed for this one.
When these cases are ongoing, is it possible for the case to continue if the migrant domestic workers back home, or they have to be in Hong Kong?
No, they can still continue in back home until somebody's here for them to stand or witness, like FADWU is handling now. And also some migrant worker, if they have not claim any of their rights, money or things, so even they can go to their country and claim back from there. So someone can handle her from here. Within 1 year, as I know, within 1 year we can claim from
Okay.
our country. We don't have to
Okay.
be here.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the story with us.
No problem. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jec and Sarah, for giving us your valuable time. And thank you, all of us, for joining us today. Today, we had a chance to hear about another layer of vulnerability that migrant domestic workers face. In laws, they often have weaker and different provisions as compared to other domestic workers, like the 2-week rule by which they have to go back to their home country when they lose or quit their jobs. And in practice, as you've heard, it's extremely challenging to seek redress. There are very limited options for migrant workers if they want to leave their jobs. Unions play a critical role in supporting them to navigate complex realities of the legal system. I leave you with that thought for today. Please check the links in the description to learn more about FADWU and their work. In our next episode, we'll spend some time with Gyanu and hear about her experiences in implementation of laws for domestic workers in Nepal. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
A Sonologue production.